Hamas breaks the ceasefire, and the Middle East conflict rages. It feels like an intractable problem. There is a solution, but it isn't political. The secret is hidden in string theory. Reality's deepest layer isn't matter. It's composed of frequencies. Since the whole theme of the channel is the synthesis of Torah and science, let's look at something that's happening recently. It's still going on in the news, a bit controversial anytime you mention Israel, Hamas, Palestinians, etc. And this conflict keeps popping up. It almost seems like there's no solution. And actually, when I was first becoming religious, I really tried to dive deeply into try to find a solution. And after a few months, I realized the only thing is religious. This was 15 years ago. So I started to look into what the Torah had to say, the Bible, and I found some very interesting things. As I progressed in my level of observance and also continuing to delve into the science, I see more and more the convergence of them. So if we want to find a problem, let's look at a deeper level. So the problem now of the conflict, let's look into the physics, because the physics is a representation of the spiritual, and the conflict is over something religious, which is based on the spiritual. So let's look at this unique angle. Used of frequencies. Sefer Yetzirah taught this thousands of years ago. So this was cool. I learned this in the research now. I always knew Sefer Yetzirah, which is attributed to Avram Avinu, to Abraham. It's from 3,700 years ago. So in the second chapter, verse 3, it says there that the 22 letters of foundation, that they're engraved bakol, with voice. That the letters are engraved with voice. It's interesting, right? Because it's not just letters themselves, but we're talking about them being engraved in voice. And what's voice? Voice is made up of waves. Waves are frequencies or oscillations. And as we spoke about in a previous video, that Kabbalah talks about how letters and information is what's foundational. So what makes up letters? So Sefer Yetzirah says frequencies. And this leads to string theory. Now, string theory has sort of lost some favor in popularity in the physics world because it's very difficult to make a falsifiable prediction. But there's lots of researchers continuing to try to figure this out because the math is so elegant and it leads to some very interesting conclusions. But from our perspective, connecting it back here, it's interesting because it's saying that frequencies and vibrations is what's fundamental. And that actually through this verse in Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation connects these two concepts together. So I thought that was fascinating. God created existence through the vibrational permutations of the 22 Hebrew letters. I love to pause because some people say it's a little too fast. So I gave a little pause here to reflect and internalize that. And now that you have listened to me just now, you have more to think about and reflect on. This week's Parsha reveals Ishmael and Yitzchak are not just historical figures. They are two cosmic frequencies whose dissonance sustains a millennia-long conflict. Is there any hope that these unresolved vibrations can harmonize into everlasting peace between Israel and her Arab neighbors? I love the music. It's so intense. Before I go on, I want to thank this week's video sponsor, Rabbi Yossi Winner, who, if you like my content and my style on bringing Torah and science together, Rabbi Yossi grew up learning steeped in Jewish mysticism, and later on got his degree and his certifications and licensing as a psychotherapist. And so he has a unique blend that not many people do of not just combining Torah with psychology, but Jewish mysticism, the inner dimension of Torah. And his information is in the link below. And I highly advise you, if there's any issues you or someone else, a loved one has, areas that deal with anxiety, PTSD, depression, addiction, he's an excellent resource, and call him for a free consultation and make sure to mention his video. Since we're talking about conflict right now. The Zohar provides a clue. Yaakov and Esav are two colors of holiness that did not join in this world, but in the future they will be united. Yaakov and Esav are spiritual parallels to Yitzchak and Yishmael. So I thought it was interesting that the Zohar didn't have that connection for Yishmael and Yitzchak, but it's very well often understood that Isaac and Jacob are on one side of Tikkun, and Yishmael and Esav on the other side. Now, what I originally had in an earlier draft, but I eventually took out for space reasons, was that Yishmael did do some level of Tikkun later on when he came for the burial for his father, for Abraham, whereas Esav is still not. Now, on the spiritual level, there's still conflict going on, but there was some level of rectification and healing that happened. So perhaps the Zohar is alluding to that. But the whole idea that they're colors. Colors, once again, colors are waves that oscillate. Red has long wavelength, and blue has short wavelength. And so color is only represented really from its wavelength. That's it. Similar to sound. Color is defined by oscillation rate. Red oscillates slower, while blue oscillates more quickly. Kabbalah explains that Yishmael originates from Tohu, primordial divine light so intense it shattered its vessels. And interestingly, that's the idea also that the shattering of the vessels, that the first world that was made, nothing could get along, Everyone had their own feeling of me. The Rebbe Rashab has a mimer on this called Heichatzu, where he goes into this idea. He connects with the Midian. It's not for this parsha, it's from the summer parshas. And he just talks about how Tohu, like you can't get along and then you just get shattering. And the sparks have fallen. And part of our job is to go out and elevate those sparks. And interestingly, recently in Tanya, from this past Shabbos, it talks about how making Chedushay Torah, innovations in Torah, is actually one of the things that the Elyonim, as it says in Hebrew, that the angels and the souls that are high up come down into this world to listen to the novel insights, because part of the reasons because we're finding them, but also part of it's that we're making a Chiddush because of the way that we're extracting the sparks. And these sparks of wisdom from above, from Atzilus, come down and are wrapped in things. And that's one of the things that actually motivates this channel. I don't have the book here with me. There's a book called Hidden Sparks, I think. I have to look up the name. If you write in a comment and you want to know the book, let me know and I can put it there. I can actually send you a PDF because you can't buy it anymore. It was sent to me as a PDF. That's from 1996. But he has a bunch of quotes from Vilna Gaon saying that he believes that this is the key element missing to bring Mashiach, or at least one of the major ones, is bringing Torah and science together. And not only that, actually, he said in a statement that seems a little controversial, and the author had to write long footnotes to defend it, which was quoted from his son-in-law, that without understanding science properly, you're missing up to 100-fold understanding in Torah itself. That without that, and you can see in the channel, by the way, that understanding more of the science helps you get a deeper appreciation and understanding of the Torah. It's one thing to just talk about tohu and light, but when you actually start connecting, light is frequency, color is frequency, Sefer Yetzirah, the letters themselves are engraved in voice. They're engraved in frequencies, and that the letters information, and you have this progression in science. Like we said the past few times, seems like matter is fundamental, then energy is fundamental. As it progressed throughout the 1900s, then fields are fundamental, and then information is fundamental, and consciousness is fundamental, and you see, and then what's the information? And so here you have letters, but then you also have the idea that frequencies are really fundamental. So why? Is it contradictory? Well, the Sefer Yetzirah line is so cool because it brings it all together. That the letters which make the world are based in foundations. So it's not a stira at all. For those that went to yeshiva, it's not a stira. So it's very cool. Modern engineering discovered what the Arizal already knew. So for those that don't know, this is a classic thing shown to physics undergrads in graduate school. And when we learn about resonance in our mechanics classes, especially when I was in I think it was undergrad. Yeah, it was advanced undergrad mechanics when I was at Rutgers. And it's very cool that this is a very famous example of what can go wrong if you don't have the proper dampening. And it popped in my mind as we're talking about this, as I'm writing, like, oh, we're talking about resonance between Yitzchak and Ishmael. Let's bring up the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Amplifying oscillation destroys. In 1940, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapsed from aeroelastic flutter, where the structure's motion created aerodynamic forces that further intensified the vibration in a self-reinforcing cycle until catastrophic failure. I think the only casualty was a dog. I think everyone was able to get out in time. And the engineers earlier were trying to find ways to fix it. Essentially, the first idea was that somehow that the frequency of the wind coming by, and if you notice, the bridge looks like, for anyone who took physics, like a standing wave. So that depending on the nodes, you get standing waves, and the wavelength of the standing wave somehow corresponded with the wavelength of the wind. Later on, people said that this effect was actually a self-reinforcing one, which connects very nicely with the Parsha. Yishmael's spiritual nature manifested in our Parsha, where his idolatry, immorality, and murder nearly led to his death. But if uncontrolled oscillation causes collapse, how do we achieve harmonic stability? The Lubavitcher Rebbe revealed that redemption comes by introducing Tohu's light into Tikkun's vessels. The Rebbe was very big into this. He was like, go out into the world, but don't let the world affect you. Be in the world, but above the world at the same time. So in this context, it's take the light of Tohu, to sort of crazy everything else, but put it in a way that you can put a seder to it, that you can put an order to it. And find a way to contain that light and have these two contradictory themes converge. And that's what's required to help finish the rectification from early on when the lights of Tohu shattered the vessels and all the sparks fell. And we're here to find those sparks and refine them. I mentioned the example earlier about insights in Torah, but also every time we make a blessing, a bracha, we eat an apple, and you use that energy for learning Torah, doing a mitzvah, doing a good deed. That's one of the ways to elevate the sparks. In addition, self-refinement, which we spoke about in last week's video, when you're neshama, your soul comes into this body. It has a job to do internally of refining the character traits of the animal soul, which animates it. And that's because every body that comes down has one of those sparks or some level of sparks from the original shattering of the vessels. And so self-refinement is a goal, and every single time a soul comes down and reincarnates. That's in addition to your outward goals of doing good things for others in a general way, and then for your general obligations, put it on to fill in, eating kosher, not eating treif, shaking a lulav nasarg, eating matzah during Pesach, etc. But then also taking your individual talents, right? What you're good at, and saying, okay, what I'm good at, what naturally comes to me, that's an area I'm supposed to, my soul came down to do something with. And the areas where I'm not so strong, that's an area where I need to refine myself and keep working at that. That's not my main goal in life in terms of what to do, but it's my goal in terms of tikkun, in terms of rectification. So you see, there's like a bunch of things going on, and so you have multi-pronged missions when you're here in this reincarnation, and every single one. And your neshama benefits greatly on a personal level, and then all these refinements and missions you're working on help bring the ultimate fulfillment of why Hashem created the world, which is to bring Mashiach and to have a dwelling in the lowest realms. Yitzchak represents Tikkun, whose refined structure provides the stable vessel that can potentially harmonize, it's so pretty, with Yishmael's chaotic energy without shattering. The My New Yorker, I was really from New Jersey, it came out that energy, it came out. This operates through two frequencies. First, the world's existence depends on Torah study. For those that realize this is actually a shelf of Sidurim, of prayer books, not Torah study. So if you know that, Yeshakayach, congratulations. And if you don't know that, it looks pretty cool. This concept's from Perka Avos, but it's rooted in the Gemara in Shabbos 88a. whose Hebrew letters are the vibrational frequencies sustaining the cosmos. Second, performing mitzvos calibrates your soul to the divine will. My 3-year-old loves matzah, so I showed him this. He goes, matzah, matzah. Transforming destructive interference into constructive harmony. But how does adjusting your personal spiritual frequency trigger global transformation? This 3,700-year pattern reaches its climax with the Zohar's prophecy of those two colors of holiness finally uniting. Physical and spiritual reality will be measurably unified. That's supposed to be a double helix. Not sure why. The AI liked it. So I was like, you know what? We'll keep it in there. Why not? This unification of the two colors, of the two resonance. So you're going from dissonance to resonance and uniting in one infinite light. As one wavelength, when Mashiach arrives, your next mitzvah engineers this convergence. We're not fighting against Hamas's destructive pattern. Rather, we're amplifying Tikkun's coherent signal. So this is a similar aspect to what the Rebbe would often say, which quotes from the Tanya, which is that a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. So there's some who are so focused on fighting against. But the deeper way for success that can be totally beyond nature is to focus on the light. And so in this way, we're talking about finding tikkun, finding repair for the world in general, which especially comes from Torah, tefillah, tzedakah, or ma'asim tovim, and in general, using that as a way spiritually for what we can do. Unless you're mamish in the IDF, us, for most Jews who are not, and who are out chutz la'aretz, who are out here, even though I read recently there's more Jews in Israel than outside of Israel, but still, even then, most Jews, including most women, are not serving and fighting directly. It's only a few 100,000 compared to the 15 to 18 million Jews in the world, whatever the exact number is. So our goal, our job, is to focus on tikkun and positive things that we can do. This leads us to and realizing that the spiritual is the true source and that Hashem is the one who does. Like it says in Tehillim 127, it talks about those who guard a city guard it in vain unless Hashem's watching the city, and those who try to build a building or a house will build it in vain unless Hashem builds it for them. Not just peace between Israel and Hamas when the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, but to calibrating redemption's amplitude itself. Your mitzvah unites all frequencies into the one infinite light. And that whole alignment with the light, with the frequencies, and it all comes back together. I think it's so nice. This week's video is in loving memory of Lilian Bat Yorav, sponsored by her children, Frank and Cheryl Saragosi. If you'd like to sponsor, please click on the form, send, or just send me an email. If you have a question, I'm more than happy. And or if you're not sure if now's the right time, or it's coming up in a few months, or you want to sponsor for a holiday, Chanukah, Yud Kislev, Yud Teves, Yud Shvat, something like that, let me know. And it's eternal. It's not just when you sponsor a class, 10, 20, 30 people there. Maybe it goes out on a little podcast. This is a video you can keep forever and goes out to, God willing, thousands of people. And the name of your loved one's always out there. So it's very nice. Okay, until next time, make sure to click on the, you know what I'm going to say, to see the playlist of the other Torah and Science Insights. It's going to be over here somewhere. How about both like this? Because usually I have the other one pop up after that. And really, if you haven't done so already, subscribe, like, share, comment, the whole thing. It really does help. I know you hear it in all the videos, but the algorithm actually cares, and leave a comment. Until next time, have a great week. I wish you all the best, and thank you for your continued support.